In this episode, we discuss how applying infinite game concepts to health, relationships, and business give you the focus and discipline to keep playing long term.
Welcome to the Chain Effect Podcast, where a physical therapist and a dietitian married with 2 kids juggle the struggle of running a business, raising a family, and prioritizing our own health, all while trying to have as much fun as possible.
We're your hosts, Taylor Pope, Doctor of Physical Therapy, and
Caroline Pope, registered dietitian.
Together, we own and operate a health facility bringing together physical therapists, dietitians, personal trainers, and active recovery services to create what we call the Chain Effect. Today, we're going to talk about a book that I have read and I love. It's called
Have you finished it?
Okay. Yes, I am guilty of not finishing.
Well, have you finished it?
Well, I have finished this one.
Okay, but this is one of the 15 lying around the house that look new and you kind of like bring with you in the car if we're going on a trip, or you put on your nightstand and then they're like back all spread all over the house.
Yes, that is the same book.
And I'm like, which one are you on?
Yeah.
Have you finished each one of these?
Well, believe it or not, I'm actually reading a book right now called The Joy of Compounding. It is one of the many books I'm reading all at the same time.
Like a pharmacy lab or?
It's about investing, but also just like...
That's what I think of every time I see compounding.
Compounding knowledge. It's also about like compounding knowledge and habits and different things and character and all these different habits as well.
Like
but
micro habits.
Yeah. It gives you the permission to read lots of books at the same time, because it says that you'll find that you will create a mental lattice work between all the books and start to make connections between unrelated books that have like a similar through line. Well, I was like,
if they're all on the same topic.
No, it's just like random books, all different topics, but you'll start to like find little universal truths almost like throughout the books. Anyway, it gave me permission to read a bunch of books at the same time.
See, my mind does not work like that.
For my ADD is...
What does this author have ADHD too?
Probably not.
This is like when you open up your computer.
Oh gosh.
And you have...
The tabs?
I'm not...
Or the emails, which...
Oh, well, the emails are like 2,043.
30...
Oh, 33,000 or something like that now. Wow, I don't even know how Gmail stores all that. But also the tabs, and this is no lie, this is not an exaggeration, probably like 43 tabs open. They're so small, you don't have any idea. The logo is not even on it. Like the picture is not even on it. It's so tiny.
Well, and then I realized that my battery is only lasting like 30 minutes. And it's because not only are those 40 tabs there, but then there's another browser window sitting behind it with 40 tabs, and then another one behind it with 40 tabs. You just don't ever
close them.
And it's like,
why is my battery... God, my phone does not charge.
Yeah.
It does not hold charge. I'm like, wait, let's look at it and see how many things you have open.
It has held charge when I got rid of all my tabs.
Okay, well, there you go.
Okay, well, the book that we're going to talk about today is called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and it's awesome. Basically, this book caught my attention because I was going on a trip, just like you said, and I was actually at the bookstore when I bought this one, and I was going through looking at other books that are by Simon Sinek, and I read Start With Why, which I found to be really good, and so I picked up The Infinite Game, and it sat on the shelf for at least a year before I re-picked it up and started actually going through it. But it basically talks about the difference between finite games and infinite games. And first we got to kind of talk about some definitions there, but how we're going to talk about it is applying them to health and wellness, relationships, and mindset around our long-term goals of health and wellness. And so finite games are games that have clear players, fixed rules, and a defined end. So that's like most of our sports that we would play. Tennis, basketball, everyone knows the rules. There's a beginning, there's an
Except
end.
Me.
Well, that's true. Doesn't matter how many times we explain the rules.
Football.
Playing board games, and we got to like go back to the beginning every single time. Like, this is how this game starts.
My sister and I, it runs in the family. My sister and I are like, she got Bennett a board game, and then he wanted to play it, and you weren't here to help us. And she handed me, she tried to read the instructions and was like, I don't get it, and like threw it over to me. And I was like, I'm not going to understand this board game
And then
until we start playing.
And
just
then
figure it out as we go.
And then Bennett's like, y'all aren't playing by the rules because he is a rule follower. So, but
and his brain works like he can remember everything like that.
So the rules are agreed upon. There's a beginning, there's an end, and more importantly, the players outlast the game. So the same players will start the game and then the game finishes. So that's a finite game. An infinite game is a game in which the players may come and go. In fact, the game might outlast a lifetime, but the players will come and go. The rules change, and there is no final winner. And so for that, we're thinking about business, education, relationships, our own health, even though there is a finite end at some point to our own health. The way that we should really think about it is with this finite or this infinite game mindset. And so this book draws a lot of distinctions between people that are playing an infinite game with a finite game mindset. So for instance, it talks a lot about businesses that like Microsoft versus Apple, who Microsoft was always trying to beat Apple, and Apple was always trying to make the best product and was focused on continual improvement. Yeah. And so like at some different points in the company's history, like Microsoft was ahead of Apple, but Apple like wasn't playing the same game. They were just focused on creating, the best product, innovating, bringing these tools to everyone. And so at some point it really started to hurt Microsoft because they were only trying to win in what they were doing. Like they weren't focused on their own mission.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about some of the essential practices of playing an infinite game the right way, and then how they will relate to health and wellness and your mindset around your own health. So the first one is you got to have a just cause. So a cause that is, greater than yourself, a big reason for why you're doing what you're doing. And this is where this book like really drew me in, is when in this first section, he was talking about a just cause. And one of the stories that he told was of a seed bank story from World War II. And it's super powerful, but basically, during the Battle of Leningrad, which lasted a long time, it was the siege of Leningrad, which lasted, believe it or not, like sieging one city basically lasted 3 years.
Wow.
1941 to 1944. And it was one of the longest, deadliest blockades in history. Food became incredibly scarce and 1 million people died from starvation. And tucked away in the middle of the city, and in basically a nondescript building, there was the Vavilov seed bank. And so prior to the war, this guy, Nikolai Vavilov, was a Russian botanist and a geneticist. And he had dedicated his life to preserving crop diversity. So he would travel all around the world and gather seeds from all these different regions and temperaments, because he believed that if we had the science behind what seeds to plant during droughts or times when it was extra wet, all these different weather events, that we could basically engineer our food creation forever. Like we'd be able to grow food in any environment and under any conditions. And so that was his just cause. And so this, terrible war is going around him, the siege is going around him, and people are starving. And his scientists are basically locked into this building. They're all living there. And all around them is thousands of pounds of rice, potatoes, all kinds of different seeds, corn, wheat, just tons of food. It could have sustained them. It could have even sustained like large parts of the city for, a long period of time, months. But none of the scientists gave it to the citizens, and none of the scientists themselves ate the food.
For the greater good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like they had this just cause that they were willing to die for to eventually like preserve humanity. And at the end of the siege, 9 of the scientists had died from starvation. Can you imagine like dying of starvation and there's food right there? And so like the power of that just cause can lead to extraordinary results. And so we start by talking about that because in your health and wellness, you need to have a just cause. You need to have some goal in mind that is why you're doing everything, what you're doing everything for. That can be short term, but I think we get too caught up in these like short term spits and spats of like, all right, I'm going to lose 10 pounds for the summer.
Beach body.
Or like, I'm going to, get strong or do this, or I'm going to train for this season. And then after the season's over, I'm just letting everything go. And then, when the season comes back around, like I'm going to start getting in shape again.
Well, we live in a immediate gratification culture. So it's natural, like with the social media and screens and all the stuff you tap, get that dopamine hits. I feel like that's just gotten worse over time or harder to combat, like thinking of these long-term goals when you can get things at your fingertips right away, like Amazon packages and things like that. Same thing with pills or supplements to make you quote unquote healthier or lose weight. And it's like, no, I want to lose weight and there's a way I'm going to do it, by the summer and I'm going to look my best. And that's what I'm working for. And that's it.
Right. And also just, to that point, like there's so much promise of these immediate results and, doing something and just like, not having to actually put the work in and getting the result. And so I think that it's easy to think about your just cause as being something that's sort of selfish. But I also think, like, for instance, I want to have a long life. I want to be active when I'm a grandparent. I want to be able to play on the ground and I want to enjoy my retirement. We've talked a lot about health span, how we don't want to have, kind of quote Peter Attia, like that marginal decade, which is where a lot of people will actually live their last decade of life, but have really declined mobility, community, because they're not able to get out and move around. They're constantly going to doctor's visits. And so, the idea is that we want to basically slide into death on a full sprint, right? Like enjoying life every second and then have that very quick decline whenever that is. And so we've really enjoyed that last decade instead of it being marginalized. So I think it's really easy to think about your just cause as being like those long-term goals. But I also think, you could also frame that just cause as being something that, you want to improve the lives of your family. You want to improve your children's and really set them up with the habits.
Be a role model too. Yeah.
Exactly. And think about like your role in life is to pass down a lot of this health and wellness knowledge, the habits, the work that it takes to really be disciplined to be healthy in today's society, which to be honest, it takes an incredible amount of discipline because so much of our lives are sedentary these days. Our food is marketed toward us with terrible additives. I mean, you really have to work to eat healthy. You have to work to move.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me thinking about that, like we make it a lot harder on ourselves. Some things we do to decrease screens and get the kids active and, do dinners at the table all together. That takes a lot more work, but I'm just thinking down the road, like how happy we'll be, or hopefully we will decrease the amount where our kids are just in their room with the door closed, like wanting to be on their computer or phone or whatever, or just sit in front of the TV or play video games. We're nurturing this now so that they want to hang out with us later down the road, or we can do cool things as a family and we can be active and they want to be active and not inside, all the time.
Yeah.
And what a happier life that'll be for us later.
Yeah. We've talked so much about how important it is to have that one meal at the dinner table all together. And we've also talked about how hard of a journey that's been with our 2 boys who are now 6 and 4. And granted, it's still a struggle because now our 4-year-old is like, takes like 3 bites and then he's off like playing and trying to do whatever. But Bennett, our older one, will sit with us at the
For a
table
long
for like an hour.
time. Yeah.
I mean, granted, he eats slow as molasses, but we actually are like having these long meals at the end of the day where we're sitting down and, you know, you and I have finished, you know, 20 minutes before he does, but he's talking to us. You know, we're actually like having
it's a good time
focus.
to open up.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, having that just cause and really thinking about it, not just inside your own sort of intrinsic motivation, but thinking about things as, you know, helping your community, helping the people around you, that can really help with that just cause. The next one is trusting teams. Now, we've talked a lot about, you know, how important it is to have members of your healthcare team. But I think in this, it's also about, you know, getting people around you who have strong character, getting people around you who are trusted, are very trustworthy, because we live in this sort of high performing society. And what I think goes under the radar is the importance of having humility and knowing when you don't have the right answer.
Yeah.
And being trustworthy enough to say like, hey, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but I'll find it.
Yeah.
And then having someone that you know can be relied upon. And so Simon in the book talks about the Navy SEALs selection process for their teams. And you got to think like of anybody that's going to have, you know, the importance of getting the right team members on the team. It's the Navy SEALs who are in these life and death situations all the time and really rely on each individual member to pull their weight. And what they say is that they will, they prioritize performance and trust, but they will often avoid someone who's a really high performer who has low trust in favor of the medium performer who has high trust, because they know that, you know, you don't have to be the star, but what you have to do is you have to do the right thing when it's necessary. And so when you're thinking about like building teams around you, or, you know, building your friendships and choosing where to invest your time in relationships, in healthcare providers, in people that are your business associates, and, you know, who to follow. It's so important to think about that character and trust. And I know that that's such like a buzzword for you, because like you are always, I call Caroline our like character screener, because she has such a knack when we're hiring of picking the people that have high character. It's impressive.
Yeah. I kind of, if I get any sort of red flags or yellow flags, I'm like, no, Taylor, no. Or I might be, you know, we might hire them, and then if something happens, I just get a bad feeling. I just get a bad gut reaction. But I do see this in, so I'm big on hiring by character, but we do see this a lot, like with our dietitians. You know, they've told me about, and other providers, like as health professionals, where the research is always growing, the research is always changing, and there's so much misinformation. I know we've had providers say they have that imposter syndrome. Like, how do I deal with this? It is so hard sometimes in my sessions to feel like I'm letting down my patient because I don't know everything, or they have a very specific question or a very specific goal. And
it's not black and white.
It is not black and white. And so I do think it looks so much better. And we know the character of our providers, where it's like, you know what, I don't know. And the research is constantly changing, but I'm going to go research that for you and have an answer next time I see you.
Right.
Because I do think that is so important. Like, you don't have to be the highest performer, and we don't expect that. And we tell people that when we hire them too, like, we don't expect you to know everything or be the best, but we are going to train you, and we're going to grow. We want you to grow with us, just like we're continuing to grow. But you have to have those characters. We have to be able to trust you and have clients entrust in your services.
And I always talk about, you know, those soft skills versus hard skills. Like, those soft skills are sometimes so much more important, because we can teach the hard skills of programming and exercise selection and how to organize your sessions to be the most effective and all those things. But being able to empathize with people, being able to listen, and also not be like a BS artist, right? Because like at the same time, if
people
someone's
can usually
like,
see through that too.
If someone's like, asks you this complex question and you just give this like answer, like you're trying to win a contest, then you're not leaving any room for yourself to be like, come back to the drawing board and say like, yeah, it's complicated. Like there's times when this is right and there's times when that is right. And I think, leaving some room for ambiguity is so important. So, making sure that the people you surround yourself with, your teammates, have high trust. And I think, we've talked a lot about, if you go back to like the Lauren McHenry podcast that we did, that was all about the importance of trust and building confidence. And so that comes from not just being so focused on winning, but being more focused on playing the game the right way and having that growth mindset.
And that's why it's so cool when we do have employees, or if you have anyone in your life who's like, I want to learn from you. Like, I respect you so much, what y'all are doing, or I'm here to grow. It's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, you don't claim to know everything. We don't either.
Right. Yeah. So. Just having that like gratitude these days is so hard. So the next essential practice is finding worthy rivals. And so this one's kind of interesting, but basically it talks about, when you're playing a finite game, where a game where you're really trying to win in sports, you can view your rivals as an obstacle that you have to overcome, right? So you can think about them like, so-and-so's playing ahead of me and I have to, beat them so that I can get on the court. Or, we're going to be playing against this team and they have this player and we have to figure out a way to neutralize them or make them, less than. But when you're playing infinite games, if you can switch that mindset and think about, your rivals as just a little bit further ahead than you, like they're just a little bit further ahead in the game, someone that instead of thinking about them from like a jealousy standpoint or an envy standpoint, I mean, you can envy them, but you should be thinking about them as basically a tool or someone that you can collaborate with so that you can, build up and improve your game, as opposed to thinking of them as like an obstacle that you have to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you do this a lot because you see so many patients and you're talking with so many different kinds of successful people or really smart people. And you're always telling me stories like, he was so cool. And he does this, and this, but you're trying to learn, like get as much information from them, which is cool. Yeah.
I just feel like we just have to, the more that you can have that growth mindset and think about every obstacle, every person as, not your competition, but like as a, you're trying to get in their flock almost. And so like, what are they doing to get there? The more that you can think about the tactics that they're doing, the habits that they're doing, how they got from point A to point B, the more likely you are to be on the same level as that worthy rival. And what's so interesting is in the book, Simon talks about his rivalry with this other author named Adam Grant. And they both sort of operate in the same sphere. And Simon had all of this imposter syndrome about like, am I as good as Adam? And da-da-da-da-da. And finally they got together and they realized that they both had the same feelings about each other. Like Adam felt
which is often the case, I think.
Yeah, like they both felt like they were inferior to the other one, which was so interesting.
Well, I feel like that happens a lot when people aren't vocal about it. Like they finally come to like, wait, I thought you didn't like me because I did this. No, I thought you didn't like me because and it ends up being like this jealousy thing. But I think that's so important with, you've talked about this with business as well. Like, I wish I could just we tried to create at one point in the very beginning of our business, like a triangle health professional group or something like that where we could like come together.
Yeah.
And that didn't really work out because we didn't keep up with it. It was like, we're just too busy for like a Facebook group.
Yeah.
But
building a community takes work.
But trying to build a community so that you can learn from each other instead of competing with other physical therapy offices or nutrition offices. And that is cool. And I think you started from the beginning too, like with your kid, or started from, if you start with your kids, like starting to see our kids play sports and stuff and get more competitive. I can see how you're like, I want him to win. I want him to beat that kid. I want him to beat that kid. But on the same side, you're with these other parents who have their kids there and you're like, wow, if you start encouraging the conversation and letting your kid hear that, like, oh, wow, your son is so good. Like, or talking with Bennett about, oh yeah, he's really fast, isn't he? Mm-hmm. Or he's really strong.
And I think it can be viewed as kind of this arms race too. Like, what are they doing? And then people want to be secretive about like what tactics or what, side coaching they're having or who their little, strength and conditioning coach is because they don't want to share because they don't want other people to get to the same level.
To be the best.
But like, that rising seas lifts all boats. Having that mindset, just there's so much available to us. And you talked about business. I think about this other cash pay physical therapy practice in Raleigh that I'm always sort of checking in with and seeing what they're up to. And you're right. Like I've always wanted to just sit down and have lunch with the owner because I just think that there's so much business for all of us that we don't need to be competing over certain clients because the more that we build, the experience of a cash pay physical therapy being superior, then the more people are going to flock to our businesses overall. So like we both grow from having a superior product. And if I can help them be superior, then they can help us be better, then we both win.
It leads to referring too.
Oh, like this person does this a little bit better.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna, send you to this clinic. We're a friend. We've talked, and we believe they might be a better fit for you for this, thing you're experiencing. So
and talk about trust building.
Yeah, like
to send a physical therapy client to another physical therapist. Just because you think that they're going to be a better fit for that client, there's almost nothing that compares to that like level of trust that you just gain by doing that.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next essential practice is existential flexibility. So this one's, kind of interesting to think about, but basically the way they talk about it is the willingness to pivot when necessary. And that even if that means disrupting your own success. And so the classic example that they use is basically Apple. There's a lot of Apple talk here, but like Apple, invented the iPod and then right after that made the iPhone, which made the iPod completely obsolete.
Yeah.
And so
irrelevant.
Yeah. And so they put all this work into the iPod and built that up and it was super successful. And then they made the iPhone, which basically meant the iPod was no longer needed. And how many iPods? We still have like 2 iPods.
I think we still have a container of our old
just
iPods.
Like sitting there, at least 3 that don't even turn on. I don't know why they're still there, but like, how do you not? I just can't throw it out. Like it's got the music on there somewhere, even though the music is on Spotify and YouTube everywhere.
I know. Well, it's like CDs. It's like hanging on to CDs.
God, they're everywhere, right? I have.
Oh, I just gotta declutter at some point, but it's kind of like it's memories.
But the way I think about this is, we're doing a lot of things in our life that are successful, right? We all have these different theaters for which we are operating in, and maybe we're crushing the bucket of our work, maybe we're crushing the bucket of our fitness. Maybe we're crushing the bucket of spending time with friends and being or being a great role model. But there's probably this other area of our lives that we know that we need to give more attention to. And giving more attention to that area is going to sacrifice some of the investment that we're able to make in those other areas where we're already being successful. But in the end, it makes us a more complete person because we can divert those resources of time and energy to this area that we're a little bit,
neglecting.
A little bit neglecting. And then we can improve that and then repivot back to those other areas once we have the, habits and momentum going in that area that we've been neglecting.
I feel like you've done this some with training for your sport, like switched up your workouts, or maybe you did a time where you went to yoga instead because you're like, I'm so tight, but this is like really important right now. I need to do that once a week or twice a week instead of a strength workout.
Yeah.
And
it's so hard because, that's a great analogy because, I'm always thinking like, okay, do I do some mobility work or do I work on strength? And I'm always like, I gotta keep working on strength. Gotta keep working on strength.
Power.
Power. Gotta keep working on fitness so I can jump high, run fast.
But I can't touch my toes with anything.
But working on that mobility creates more room to express that power, more room to express that strength. So you're absolutely right. And that's a good reminder. I need to start incorporating more movement practice into my own practice. But the same thing happens with like runners.
Yeah.
Right? Where you get into this marathon training and you're thinking about like, I got to put more miles in. I got to put, more and more and more miles, and you're building up your mileage each week. Or tennis players where they're like, I've seen so many like young tennis players that are practicing like 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you just took one of those workouts and sacrificed that for a strength training session, you would have so much more power and athleticism on the court.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to get in that mindset of like, well, if I miss this workout, like I'm going to, not see my same accelerative growth curve that I've been used to, where I put the inputs in, I shoot the free throws, and I make more free throws.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, like you need to, do something else, like, and it's going to help your game overall.
Yeah. And I can see this in family life too, or if you're trying to improve your own health or the health of your family, like you've had this pattern going, maybe the kids watch TV while you're like messing around before dinner, or you're doing something, but everyone needs to get outside, or you need to go for a walk. So instead of that, you replace, instead of this calm thing, you replace that with, we're going to go on a family walk before dinner. Instead, get up, go outside, or just disrupting that successful.
And the objections of that.
Yeah.
The objections
and then you
like you have to go through.
But like, I know this is going to be better for all of us. Or, same thing with like going to bed earlier and disrupting that cycle where, I can relax at night. I just
it's
watch
the only
TV.
time I can get to like be by myself.
But it's like, well, maybe it's better to get more sleep. And then that helps you in a lot of other ways and gives you more energy towards other things.
So true. So true. The final topic is the courage to lead. And this is sort of summarized as leaders must be willing to challenge norms and prioritize long-term vision over short-term gains. And this is so hard. Like the analogy that I think about when I think about this is like the NFL, where there's these teams that are trying to get better and better and grow, but the coaches are hired and fired like they're a pair of sneakers that just get worn out, right?
Yeah.
And so they're the best organizations tend to be the ones like the Packers and the Patriots. And I'm trying to think of some other ones that have just that longevity of coaching, where the coaches are given the permission to fail over the course of several seasons if they're showing continual improvement or they're building that progress. And this happens a lot of times in our society where we're constantly seeking that short-term gratification. We're looking at things quarter by quarter or even year by year, when really we need to have more of that like 5-10-year vision. Are we doing the things that are building towards these longer term goals versus these short-term wins that are going to make me look good as the leader?
Yeah.
But they're not actually accomplishing the bigger goal. And so that's where, you'll see all these CEOs come in and they're like trying to like change everything or manipulate the numbers so that they can, raise the stock price, but it's not actually helping the business in a long-term sense.
Yeah.
You're making decisions that are going to affect now versus adding to the overall health of the business or stability. And
yeah, it's kind of like businesses where you can tell there's changes all the time, like changes in what they're doing or whatever. It's like boom, boom, but it's like someone new is coming in and changing it. It's like, that causes less trust for sure.
A little disruption too. Yeah. And so it's, one of the analogies that they use is, CVS stopping the sale of cigarettes. And it's like, it seems kind of crazy now, but this was a little bit back. But CVS used to have $2 billion in revenue by selling cigarettes. But if you think about CVS, it's a pharmacy. It's a health place. Yeah. It's a place of health. You should not be selling cigarettes there. And so they made the decision to stop selling cigarettes at CVS because it aligned with their mission of health and reinforcing their brand's credibility. And so that is a tough leadership, like as the CEO, like, hey, we're going to take $2 billion off of our revenue, off of our top line this year, because we're going to change the credibility of our brand, which is something that's really hard to measure.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, CVS, and I think Walgreens was like a little bit behind them, started getting, much, much more market share of the business because people noticed.
Yeah.
People had initial pain from that, but then they started to notice, like, you are in line with what we're trying to do here. So those are some of the things that, we want to be thinking about when we're thinking about having that infinite mindset. How can we move from more short-term to long-term goals? How do we have, I always talk about that, like, long-term athletic ability.
Yeah.
Like the exercise you're doing today, the health changes that you're making today are not for just this season. They're for the subsequent seasons. And I know personally, like, I'm always trying to be a better athlete this year than I was last year, which is sort of counterintuitive because everyone knows that as you get older and older and older, you're going to be diminishing your athletic potential overall. Yeah. But if you change your tactics, if you keep optimizing and you keep that sort of long-term focus, you can definitely make that decline super gradual to where you might not even notice decreases in speed or athleticism year to year. And having those goals to work on really sort of empower you to keep it going.
And if you don't know what your long-term goals might be or your core values, what you're striving for, then think about when you're old, what do you want to look back and say that you've done? Like,
right.
Not be mobile for the last 30 years of your life. But right now, maybe create some core values or your mission, your personal wellness mission, what you want to do for your family, what you want your family to be, to keep growing.
And I think the main call to action is think about these different buckets in your life and ask yourself, are you playing this game like an infinite game? Or are you playing it like a finite game? Are you trying to win a game that should be more considered like an infinite game? Are you trying to win a relationship? Are you trying to win your job? Are you trying to win your health versus that having that growth mindset of trying to lift everybody up and do the right thing because it's the right thing? So.
All right, well, there's your cliff notes on the book.
Yeah, you don't even need to read it now. We just listen to this podcast.
So stay infinite, not finite.
Stay infinite. And if you have any questions or, hey, if you think this podcast was helpful for you, please do us a favor and text it to someone. Just do that one thing. Text it to someone that you think could benefit from listening to this, and that would help us out a lot. And you know where to reach us, Caroline at chaineffect.us. Taylor at chaineffect.us, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Catch you later.